Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Advent of Divine Justice. Dear friends, this is Exploring the Advent of Divine Justice, Part 3. In this section, dear friends, we will be exploring paragraphs 4 through 9. And the topics will be impact of upheavals on the Bahá'í community. So let us start going through the paragraphs 4 through 9. Paragraph 4. These recurrent crises, which, with ominous frequency and resistless force, are afflicting an ever-increasing portion of the human race, must of necessity continue, however impermanently, to exercise in a certain measure their baleful influence upon a world community which has spread its ramifications to the uttermost ends of the earth. How can the beginnings of a world upheaval, unleashing forces that are so gravely deranging the social, the religious, the political, and the economic equilibrium of organized society, throwing into chaos and confusion political systems, racial doctrines, social conceptions, cultural standards, religious associations, and trade relationships? How can such agitations on a scale so vast, so unprecedented, fail to produce any repercussions on the institutions of a faith of such tender age, whose teachings have a direct and vital bearing on each of these spheres of human life and conduct? Little wonder, therefore, if they who are holding aloft the banner of so pervasive a faith, so challenging a cause, find themselves affected by the impact of these world-shaking forces. Little wonder if they find that in the midst of this whirlpool of contending passions, their freedom has been curtailed, their tenets contemned, their institutions assaulted, their motives maligned, their authority jeopardized, their claim rejected. In the heart of the European continent, a community which, as predicted by Abdu'l-Bahá, is destined by virtue of its spiritual potentialities and geographical situation to radiate the splendor of the light of the faith on the countries that surround it, has been momentarily eclipsed through the restrictions which a regime that has sorely misapprehended its purpose and function has chosen to impose upon it. Its voice, alas, is now silenced, its institutions dissolved, its literature banned, its archives confiscated, and its meetings suspended. In Central Asia, in the city enjoying the unique distinction of having been chosen by Abdu'l-Bahá as the home of the first Mashal Askar of the Baha'i world, as well as in the towns and villages of the province to which it belongs, the sore-pressed faith of Baha'u'llah, as a result of the extraordinary and unique vitality which, in the course of several decades, it has consistently manifested, finds itself at the mercy of forces which, alarmed at its rising power, are now bent on reducing it to utter impotence. Its temple, though still used for purposes of Baha'i worship, has been expropriated, its assemblies and committees disbanded, its teaching activities crippled, its chief promoters deported, and not a few of its most enthusiastic supporters, both men and women, imprisoned. In the land of its birth, wherein reside the immense majority of its followers, a country whose capital has been hailed by Baha'u'llah as the mother of the world and the dayspring of the joy of mankind, a civil authority as yet undivorced officially from the paralyzing influences of an antiquated, a fanatical, and outrageously corrupt clergy, pursues relentlessly its campaign of repression against the adherents of a faith which it has for well nigh a century striven unsuccessfully to suppress, indifferent to the truth that the members of this innocent and proscribed community can justly claim to rank as among the most disinterested, the most competent, and the most ardent lovers of their native land, contemptuous of their high sense of world citizenship, which the advocates of an excessive and narrow nationalism can never hope to appreciate. Such an authority refuses to grant to a faith which extends its spiritual jurisdiction over well nigh 600 local communities, and which numerically outnumbers the adherents of either the Christian, the Jewish, or the Zoroastrian faiths in that land, the necessary legal right to enforce its laws, to administer its affairs, to conduct its schools, to celebrate its festivals, to circulate its literature, to solemnize its rites, to erect its edifices, and to safeguard its endowments. And now recently, in the Holy Land itself, the heart and nerve center of a world-embracing faith, the fires of racial animosity, of fratricidal strife, of unabashed terrorism have lit a conflagration that gravely interferes on the one hand with that flow of pilgrims that constitutes the lifeblood of that center, and suspends on the other the various projects that had been initiated in connection with the preservation and extension of the areas surrounding the sacred spots it enshrines. The safety of the small community of resident believers, faced by the rising tide of lawlessness, has been imperiled, its status as a neutral and distinct community indirectly challenged, and its freedom to carry out certain of its observances curtailed. A series of murderous assaults, alternating with outbursts of bitter fanaticism, both racial and religious, involving the leaders as well as the followers of the three leading faiths in that distracted country, have at times threatened to sever all normal communications, both within its confines as well as with the outside world. Perilous though the situation has been, the Baha'i holy places, the object of the adoration of a world-encircling faith, have, notwithstanding their number and exposed position, and though to outward seeming deprived of any means of protection, been vouchsafed a preservation little short of miraculous. Introduction. In the paragraphs 4 through 9, the beloved guardian describes how the violent forces released through the world upheaval throw every aspect of ordinary human life into chaos and confusion, and exert their influence, though temporary, on the Baha'i community. Restriction, harassment, persecution, and limitations. The beloved guardian mentions restrictions imposed on the faith in Germany, harassment of the Baha'is in Ishqabad, persecution of the Baha'is in Persia, limitations experienced by the small Baha'i community in the Baha'i World Center as the result of religious and racial animosity and hatred. The crises that were afflicting a large proportion of humanity with tremendous force in the 1930s signaled the beginning of a world upheaval. His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá has attributed great importance to Germany. Another major point is the rise of Nazis and the World War that followed significantly impeded the advancement of European Baha'i communities. And here, dear friends, you can see pictures of the rise of Nazism. The development of the German Baha'i community resumed after World War II with the assistance of the North American Baha'is. Another major point, the first Baha'i house of worship was built in Ishqabad, Turkmenistan during 1902 through 1908 under the instruction of His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá. And here, dear friends, you can see the construction of the Baha'i house of worship built in Ishqabad. And there it is. There it is, completed. Haji Mirza Muhammad Taghi Afnan, the Vakila Douala Center, and you can see him positioned in the center. He was the maternal cousin of His Holiness the Bab, who largely paid for and supervised the building of the house of worship. And there are some pictures of the house of worship built in Ishqabad, Mashalaskar. And here's a picture of a woman's prayer meeting inside the Baha'i house of worship in Ishqabad. And this is the interior dome of the Baha'i house of worship in Ishqabad. Another major point, dear friends, within a short period, Ishqabad became a flourishing Baha'i community. Here you can see the Baha'i community of Ishqabad gathered in the house of worship. You can see how many friends after the completion of the house of worship. And look at this picture. This is the flourishing Baha'i community of Ishqabad. And here's the first Baha'i school of Ishqabad. And you can see the time, circa 1930. And this is an international Baha'i gathering on the grounds of the Baha'i house of worship in Ishqabad. Another major point in these paragraphs 4 through 9. A new phase of persecutions in Turkmenistan during the 1920s and 30s followed the formation of the Soviet Union in 1917. The central government used its new constitution and legal arguments and instruments to systematically deny the Baha'i community its Baha'i rights. In 1934, Many restrictions were imposed on the Persian Bahá'í community of Turkmenistan, such as shutting down the Bahá'í schools, expulsion of Baha'is from government jobs, banning the printing or importing books, and prohibiting the Bahá'í marriage ceremony. In 1938, the Soviet Union authorities expropriated the Baha'i house of worship in Ishqabad and leased it back to the Baha'is until 1938. Another major point, the Great Revolt that occurred in 1936 through 1939 in Palestine was a nationalist uprising by Palestinian Arabs against the British Mandate authorities, demanding immediate self-determination and an end to the open-ended Jewish immigration policy. So, dear friends, let's get into studying these paragraphs. Beginning of the world upheaval. War, conflict, and crises have always been a major characteristic of human history. However, the dynamics of the world upheaval that started in the early 19th century was fundamentally different. Dear friends, as mentioned in paragraph 4, the forces released through those agitations have been gravely deranging the social, the religious, the political, and the economic equilibrium of organized society, and throwing into chaos and confusion political systems, racial doctrines, social conceptions, cultural standards, religious associations, and trade relationships on a scale so vast, so unprecedented. And here's a picture. The winds of despair are blowing. His Holiness Baha'u'llah had discerned the signs, the convulsions, and had warned humanity. This is what His Holiness Baha'u'llah says. He says, the winds of despair are alas blowing from every direction, and the strife that divided and afflicted the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appeareth to be lamentably defective. I beseech God, exalted be his glory, that he may graciously awaken the peoples of the earth, may grant that the end of their conduct may be profitable unto them, and aid them to accomplish that which beseemeth their station. And there's the reference, dear friends, from His Holiness Baha'u'llah, gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah, pages 216 to 217. Humanity had ignored the revelation of His Holiness Baha'u'llah and his warnings. At the time the advent of divine justice was written, the massive bloodshed of World War I, dated 1914 to 1918, had ended, but the nations of the world were relentlessly preparing for World War II. And as we know, dear friends, 1939 to 1945. They were preparing for war. In paragraph 4, dear friends, Shoghi Effendi refers to those crises that were afflicting a large proportion of humanity with tremendous force as the beginning of the world upheaval. Undoubtedly, the Baha'i world community and the young institutions of the faith were bound to be affected by the adverse effects of such an upheaval. And here we see a picture, dear friends, of a completely destroyed and bombed out village. And this is the beginning of the world upheaval. World-Shoking Forces. In paragraph 5, dear friends, the beloved guardian Shaykh Effendi expounds on the impact of those world-shaking forces on those who follow the Baha'i cause. Here he says they find themselves affected by the impact of these world-shaking forces. Little wonder if they find that in the midst of this whirlpool of contending passions, their freedom has been curtailed, their tenets contemned, their institutions assaulted, their motives maligned, their authority jeopardized, their claim rejected. World-shaking forces. This is what has happened. Restrictions on Baha'is in Germany. So in paragraph 6, dear friends, the beloved guardian refers to the spiritual significance of Germany and mentions restrictions that the Nazi regime had imposed on the Bahá'í community of Germany, primarily out of misunderstandings about the purpose and function of the Bahá'í faith. The development of the Bahá'í faith in Europe began within years of the establishment of the faith in North America. London and Paris were the first centers where the Bahá'í groups were formed. However, with the journeys of His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá to Europe in 1911 and 1912, the faith was introduced to other parts of Europe. Over time, Germany became the center of the Bahá'í activities, which continued after the interruption caused by World War I. His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá has attributed great importance to Germany. This is what he says. It's very interesting, dear friends. His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá, again, has attributed great importance to Germany. In a tablet to an individual believer, he expresses no doubt that the faith of God will progress from day to day in that land, Germany, for it will be aided by the strengthening power of the Holy Spirit and the confirmation of the Word of God. And we can find that reference, dear friends, in the compilation, Germany, France, Italy, and Switzerland. And it's a compilation prepared by the Research Department of the Universal House of Justice. And again here, dear friends, this is in the same compilation, says, furthermore, Abdu'l-Bahá affirms that there is much spiritual receptivity in Germany. Many souls evince a special disposition to receive the outpourings of heavenly grace. They have the capacity to become the recipients of divine teachings. Hence, some individuals are attracted to the principle of the oneness of mankind and treat all the peoples and kindreds of the earth in a spirit of concord and fellowship. He foresees that the cause of God will make great progress in Germany. It will surpass all other regions. Finally, Abdu'l-Bahá cherishes the greatest affection for the loved ones of God in Germany and fervently beseech for them divine confirmation and blessing. The call of the kingdom proclaimed in that country will surely produce tremendous results in the future. So this is Abdu'l-Bahā's journey to Germany. In Abdu'l-Bahā's journey to Europe, 1913, Abdu'l-Bahá spent 8 days visiting Esslingen, Stuttgart, and Bad Mergentheim in Germany, giving public talks and meeting the Baha'is. In 1916, the German Baha'is erected public memorial in Bad Mergentheim in memory of His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahā's visit. And here you can see is the public memorial in Bad Mergentheim. Despite the effects of World War I, the German Baha'i community grew to the stage that in 1923 it was able to form one of the world's first Baha'i national spiritual assemblies. And here, dear friends, we see the Baha'i community of Bad Mergentheim at the public memorial of His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá. The rise of Nazism continued, and here is the persecution of the Baha'is in Germany. The rise of the Nazis and the World War that followed significantly impeded the advancement of the European Baha'i communities. In Germany, Heinrich Himmler accused the Baha'is of having international and pacifist tendencies and banned the Baha'i faith in 1937. Afterwards, the Nazi regime engaged in systematic persecutions of the Baha'is. The public memorial to His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá in Bad Mergentheim was destroyed by the Nazis. In 1939, the former members of the National Spiritual Assembly were arrested and jailed without any charges. There were more arrests in 1942, and many prisoners were sent to the concentration camps. And here, dear friends, you can see pictures of prisoners going to the concentration camps. Momentary eclipse, as highlighted by the beloved guardian in paragraph 6. These restrictions proved to be temporary. The development of the German Baha'i community resumed after World War II. The Baha'is of North America played a major role in this process as part of their second 7-year plan. In a message that the beloved guardian wrote after World War II to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Germany and Austria, he states, this is from the beloved guardian, to the Baha'is of Germany and Austria. The beloved guardian states, "It is such a joy, mingled with feelings of deep thankfulness to Baha'u'llah, to be able to resume direct correspondence with the elected national representatives of a community that has achieved so much in the past for our faith, that has been so dearly loved by Abdu'l-Bahá, and is destined to spread, as he foretold, the light of God's sacred revelation, not only in the heart of Europe, but throughout that dark, war-devastated, spiritually famished continent." Shackles removed. This is more from the beloved guardian, the same letter. Now that the shackles imposed upon that community have been removed, and its chief and central administrative institution is again vigorously functioning, a concerted, sustained, and systematic effort must be made, not only by its members, but by the rank and file of its supporters throughout that land, to expand, multiply, and consolidate the community's nascent institutions, widen considerably and rapidly the range of its literature, establish firmly and definitely, in however rudimentary a form, its national headquarters in Frankfurt, situated in the heart of that country, reinforce and develop the work assigned to its national committees, revitalize its summer schools and other subsidiary institutions, maintain and develop its contact through correspondence with national and local administrative bodies throughout the Baha'i world devise effective measures for the proclamation boldly and determinedly of the message to the masses, fortify and enrich its corporate life, and lay an unassailable foundation for its future development. And that was one sentence, dear friends, 151 words. And closing of this letter, the task is immense. The opportunities are priceless and manifold. The hour is critical and challenging. The promises given by His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá are clear, unmistakable, and soul refreshing. His assistance ready and unfailing. All that is required in thanksgiving for the protection vouchsafed to this community by Baha'u'llah is to arise with courage, high resolve, and clear vision to carry out the immediate task in its entirety, and thus prepare the way for the opening of a new and still more glorious chapter in the history of the evolution of the faith in that land. I pray from all my heart for the speedy and complete realization of the high hopes I cherish for that dearly beloved, long-suffering, richly blessed community, your true and grateful brother, Shoghi. Now, dear friends, let us explore the persecution of the Bahá'ís in Ishqabad. The beloved guardian mentions the persecution of the Bahá'í community of Ishqabad in paragraph 7. By 1928, there were over 4,000 Bahá'ís in Ishqabad. During this period, the anti-religious propaganda of the government was spreading fast, and the followers of all religions in the Soviet Union were under threat of persecution. The Bahá'í community started to experience these persecutions from 1928. In 1928, the secret police started to raid Bahá'í meetings and arrest Bahá'ís as part of its anti-religious campaign initiated under Stalin. The Bahá'í printing press was confiscated. Bahá'í administration was suppressed, and the house of worship was expropriated, as all religious buildings were declared to be government property. Bahá'ís had to rent the house of worship from the government under a 5-year lease. In 1929, the Bahá'í schools, which by then had around 1,000 students, were closed. And in the top picture, you can see the secret police had murdered a myriad of individuals. And in the bottom picture, you could see a picture of Joseph Stalin. A large number of Bahá'ís were arrested in 1929. Some were imprisoned, some sent to Siberia, and others deported to Iran. The persecution extended to taking over Bahá'í businesses and expelling Bahá'í students from universities. These severe restrictions continued until 1938. The lease of the house of worship was renewed in 1933. Under new regulations, the Bahá'í community received full ownership of the house of worship in 1935, and restrictions on the community eased. And here, dear friends, we see a picture of Stalin visiting his prison camp in Siberia. And this is where some Bahá'ís were sent to. The house of worship was badly damaged in an earthquake that occurred in Ishqabad in 1948. Its structure was further weakened by heavy rain in the following year, As a result, it was demolished and the area was converted to a public park. Interestingly, dear friends, the Baha'i house of worship at Ishqabad was so well made that it survived the 1948 earthquake, which leveled the whole city. The public memorial to Abdu'l-Bahá in Bad Mergentheim was destroyed by the Nazis in 1939. The former members of the National Spiritual Assembly were arrested and jailed without any charges. There were more arrests in 1942, and many prisoners were sent to the concentration camps. In paragraph 8, dear friends, the beloved guardian Shoaib Effendi highlights the ongoing repression of the Baha'i faith in Iran, the land of its birth. Although it is the largest religious minority in the country, it has been deprived of the basic legal rights enjoyed by other religions, such as Zoroastrians, Jews, and Christians. The civil authority has not only disregarded the fact that the Persian Baha'is have proved themselves to be among the most disinterested, the most competent, and the most ardent lovers of their native land, but also vilifies them for their elevated consciousness of world citizenship, a concept that is at odds with the regime's fanatically nationalistic paradigm. The persecution of the Baha'is in Iran entered a new stage when a new constitution was approved in 1906, and later with the establishment of the Pahlavi dynasty in 1925. The new constitution did not recognize the Baha'i faith as a minority religion in Iran, in contrast to the recognition given to Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and Christianity. In the past, mobs and local clergies were primarily the instigators of persecutions. In this new phase, dear friends, the central government became the primary initiator and executor of oppressions, using the new constitution, legal arguments, and instruments to systematically deny the Baha'i community its basic rights. In the face of persecution, the Baha'i community became more mature and openly pursued its communal and infrastructural developments. Here, dear friends, we see a picture of the Tarbiyat School in Tehran, August 13, 1933. You can see how many students in this school. The permanent closure of Baha'i schools in 1934 was a good example of this new wave of persecutions. The pronouncement issued on the 8th of December 1934 by the Prime Minister of Iran ordered the closure of 2 Tarbiyat schools and a number of other Baha'i schools. The order argued that these schools disobeyed the Ministry of Education regulations governing the operation of schools by closing on 6 December 1934, which was not a national holiday. The Baha'i community were commemorating the declaration of the Bahá'í on the 6th of December as one of the 9 holy days strictly observed by the Baha'i community all over the world. Accordingly, the Ministry of Education nullified the concession of the schools and ordered their permanent shutdown. Similar pronouncements were sent to other localities, ordering closure of around 60 Baha'i schools. Other legal constraints were forced on the Baha'is. The Baha'i community was banned from printing books, importing books, registering their marriages. Many Baha'is were expelled from their government and military positions. In 1938, it became a criminal offense to marry under a religious ceremony not offered by one of the religions recognized in the Constitution. These were just some of the measures deployed primarily to suppress the Persian Baha'i community. In paragraph 9, dear friends, the beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi, describes the disturbances occurring in the Holy Land, preventing the flow of pilgrims, suspending various projects underway at the Baha'i World Center, endangering the safety of the local Baha'i community, challenging the neutrality of the faith, threatening to cut off all forms of communication. And despite their number, exposed positions, and lack of protection, the Baha'i holy places were miraculously protected and preserved. The incident, dear friends, mentioned by the beloved guardian in paragraph 9 is a reference to the revolt known as the Great Revolt that took place during 1936 to 1939 in Palestine. This was a nationalist uprising by the Palestinian Arabs against the British Mandate authorities, demanding immediate self-determination for the Palestine Arabs and an end to an open-ended Jewish immigration policy. At that time, Great Britain was entrusted with the mandate for Palestine that was to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish national home. The mandate system had been established in the early 20th century by the League of Nations for administration of non-self-governing territories as a temporary trust. Great Britain was entrusted with the mandate in July 1922 after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire in 1922. And there's a picture of some individuals during the Great Revolt. In April 1936, the Mufti of Jerusalem called the Arabs in Palestine to observe an unlimited strike against British rule that finally ended in October 1936. This strike was supported by other forms of political protest led by urban and elitist group called the Higher Arab Committee, the HAB. This was later considered as the first phase of the revolt. The second phase of the revolt, led by peasants, was violent and lasted from September 1937 to August 1939. So this is background about paragraph 9, where the beloved guardian was talking about the conflicts and crisis in Holy Land. And this is the Mufti of Jerusalem that called the Arabs in Palestine to observe an unlimited strike against the British rule. Muhammad Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem. Dear friends, there are different estimates of the number of casualties in the revolt. According to British figures, more than 2,000 Arabs were killed in combat, 108 were hanged, and 961 died as a result of terrorist activities. The Arab sources give an estimate of 19,972 casualties. for the Arabs, of which 14,760 were wounded. And you can see some headlines from the New York Times. 47 dead in Jerusalem riots. Attacks by Arabs spread. British troops rushed the city. Baltimore News. Massacre of women, children at Hebron, told by refugees. Arab nation is in revolt. Interestingly, dear friends, in 2007, so this is now the German town that we talked about earlier, Bad Mergentheim. So this is the same German town. This is what happened in 2007. The new memorial was unveiled earlier this month on the 7th of April, 2007 by Mayor Lothar Barth, accompanied by Bachmann Solokwy, a representative of the Bahá'í Community of Germany. Bad Mergentheim can be proud that Abdu'l-Bahá came here, the mayor said, at that ceremony. The Bahá'í faith is one of the 6 major world religions. There is no other way to put it, and this should be honored accordingly. So they re-erected a monument in honor of His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá. And there we are, dear friends, part 3. Thank you so much. Looking forward to sharing part 4.